Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjanan Salakaya Chaksuranmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapidam Jainam Bhutale Swayam Rupakadam Vedati Swapadanitam Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavachakti Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dear Srila Prabhupada, were it not for you, none of us would be sitting here today. And I wouldn't have the incredible good fortune of the Sangha that's in this room today. From Radhanath Maharaj to the other new Swamiji I've just met today, I can't remember his name, Amiyanivas Maharaj. To all my God brothers and God sisters, and especially to all of you that I know and respect, and to all of you that I've recently met and have a deep affection for, I thank you so much for your service to Srila Prabhupada. This beautiful temple is a manifestation of your bhakti. It's the swarup of your bhakti. And the pleasure that Srila Prabhupada must feel and the happiness at seeing the manifestation of your bhakti. In terms of your own practice of Krishna consciousness, and to all those that this beautiful temple will attract to Krishna consciousness, I'm very grateful to you all. This has always been a difficult day for me, and it's really almost absurd that I came to your temple today, because I have always had trouble glorifying Prabhupada and Vyasa Puja, and it's interesting, the last 3 days I finally put it together that I'd come here and that I might have to speak something. And over the years, since Srila Prabhupada has left us, my Vyasa Puja thoughts have taken many different directions. Sometimes I just relish the teachings he gave us so much, and feel that I want to glorify those teachings, the process. And sometimes I feel inspired to glorify Srila Prabhupada the person because of his example. And sometimes I feel like glorifying all his achievements, which were so huge. And, I thought maybe today that I could give you maybe just one slice of one day of his company, what that was like. As you know, Srila Prabhupada was very expert in utilizing time in Krishna's service. In that there was never a nanosecond of the day that Srila Prabhupada wasn't absorbed in the presence of his spiritual master and his spiritual master's instruction to him, and his desire to give Krishna consciousness to all of us who didn't have the good fortune to be born in India, have an Indian body. So when he came to the West, as you all know, he landed in first Butler, Pennsylvania, and by the summer of 1966, or actually he was in New York and earlier than that, he founded ISKCON in June of '66. And then my younger sister Janki had met Srila Prabhupada in that year, that summer. And she had a boyfriend, his name was Mike, and he became Mukunda, and Jan became Janki. So I came for their wedding. She was the first of the first 11 disciples initiated. She was the first woman disciple. And she married Mukunda. She was the first wedding in ISKCON. I came for that wedding. And when I first met Srila Prabhupada, I was stunned by his kindness, his ability to be completely present with you, as Janki mentioned. He was, many devotees said that sometimes they felt that Srila Prabhupada had the ability to look through them, to see who they were, and to fan the spark of our dormant desire for Krishna. He was so expert at that. But dull as I was when I first met Srila Prabhupada, I thought, well, this looks like these people are fairly happy doing what they're doing, but it's not for me. I don't think I can become a devotee of Krishna. So that was only with Prabhupada for about 10 days when I first met him at this wedding. And then all of us, Mukunda, Janki, and a gypsy named Maurice and I, we went to the West Coast and picked up some of our friends, Shamsundar and Malati, at a mountain lookout tower, and went down to San Francisco to try to open a second storefront temple. So that association with Prabhupada, he arrived at the 14 January 1967 and stayed with us until just after, when was it, I believe early, end of March, April perhaps. So that time being with Srila Prabhupada, it was very easy for every person who came to the temple to spend a good deal of time with Srila Prabhupada. And we got established from that time through 1969 until India in the fall of '70. Srila Prabhupada manifested what I call, I've broken down his company into 3 segments. The first segment being his Adi period. That means with his family, just like CC is arranged in Adi, Madhyam, and Antya. So I often liken Srila Prabhupada's presence with us like that. So from 66 through 69 was the Adi period. And Srila Prabhupada had unlimited time for anyone who came to join the Krishna family. And even people that were crazy, Prabhupada made time to see them. And his day was such that he rose very early in the morning, like Thakur Bhakti Vinod did. And he translated and chanted in the dark hours of the morning. When Srila Prabhupada first came, as you know, he only carried with him the brick red volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam that he had translated in Vrindavan and published in Delhi. And at this time, we didn't have a Bhagavad Gita to study, so sometimes Prabhupada would speak from Srimad Bhagavatam. This period, from January of '67 to when he left, there are very few tapes that have been saved from that period in the archives. As many of you know, there's the famous play that he spoke to Hayagriva about Gauranga pastimes. But many of those lectures are not available from this period of time. But Srila Prabhupada would lecture and we would listen, try to ask some kind of intelligent questions. But Srila Prabhupada was, by the December of '67, he was translating the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Gaurasundar was doing transcriptions on that, and Govinda Dasji was starting to type. So Srila Prabhupada would rise very early, and then in those days we only had a program in the temple on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings. You all know about that schedule? Tuesdays and Thursdays were called darshan times with Srila Prabhupada. And so we would have kirtan, and sometimes in his room, sometimes in a park or in a shop or at the beach. We would have wonderful beach kirtans by the Pacific Ocean. So in the morning our program was 7 a.m. and Srila Prabhupada had the habit of chanting Mangala Charana. Thank you. We had many instruments in the temple at the time. And we were on one side next to a Chinese laundry, and on the other side we were various people, the Diggers and the Hells Angels. But Prabhupada trained us to try to have kirtan a little softly in the morning. It's one of the few instructions he gave us on performing kirtan in those very early days. And when Srila Prabhupada chanted this prayer, we would all play our instruments very softly. Prabhupada didn't chant quickly through this prayer, but very slowly. And of course we had no words, no songbook or anything at this time. But I remember all of us looking in rapt attention at Srila Prabhupada while he chanted. Most often he played kartals, and he had a specific way of playing kartals that was very beautiful. And it's the 1, 2, 3 rhythm on the third one where the kartals sizzle nicely. And we had instruments such as Coke bottle lids that were strung with a hole between them and put on a little ring, a little wire, and practically we had maybe 30 pairs of those people playing. And then we had small kartals, and then we had timpani drums, you know, the drums that are there in a big symphony orchestra. So we rented those. This was in the storefront. Then there was the back of a piano where this was an upright piano where the back had been taken off, and it was played like a harp, the strings on the piano. Then we had a kelp horn from the Pacific Ocean, which was a piece of seaweed that was dried. And the kelp horn was around 15 feet long. Actually, we had 3 kelp horns. And then we had a fox horn, and we had an oboe, and we had 2 mridangas, and a pair of tabla drums. And that was all in a room about at 8, maybe at 12th the size of this room. And they were all played very softly, with Srila Prabhupada chanting Mangala Charana. And that lasted about 20 minutes, between 17 and 20 minutes. And sometimes you would look around the room and actually see people crying, just listening to Srila Prabhupada pray to Krishna. And we didn't even know what Srila Prabhupada was singing at the time, but he was singing it with such depth and feeling that you couldn't keep your eyes off of him. Sometimes when he would open his eyes, they were like watery gray eyes. And he would look down and see. Courage. And then shake his head. after that, we hadn't installed responsive kirtans yet, so he would go chant, and everyone would chant Hare Krishna together. So that was in the morning. And then Srila Prabhupada would speak something. Sometimes he'd have one of his disciples or one of his students at that point. Only from New York was Hayagriva and Janki and Mukunda and Haridas. First initiation was in January, and in that spring he initiated a good 12 of us. So you would have a devotee read sometimes from Professor Sanyal's, one of his books, or one of the Srimad Bhagavatams. Then we'd have another kirtan. And Srila Prabhupada would go up to his room. So his room was a small apartment on Frederick Street, 513 Frederick Street, apartment number 36, I believe. And he would go up there, and Janki Mukunda's was 2 doors down. I believe it was apartment 34. And Janki, she had a black cat that was a pet cat. And the cat's name was Skutzelbrunzer. Does everybody know from the Lilamrita pastimes about Skutzelbrunzer? Raise your hands, please. No, hardly anybody. Okay. So Skutzelbrunzer was a black cat that had golden eyes, and he had a very deep desire to be around Srila Prabhupada all the time. And so whenever the door was open from Janki's apartment, Skutzelbrunzer would race right out the door, race right down the hall, and race right into Srila Prabhupada's apartment and sit under the bathtub. So the bathtub was one of those old affairs that had legs, the lion's feet bathtub. So he would hide under the bathtub. So Prabhupada knew that Skutzelbrunzer was under the bathtub. We all knew it was. But we thought, well, isn't it cute that he likes to be around Swamiji? So Srila Prabhupada took up the habit that, as you know, before lunch, Srila Prabhupada had a massage, and then he took a bath. So Skutzelbrunzer would be under Prabhupada's tub, and Prabhupada would take a lota bath. There wasn't a shower there. And when he took the bath, he knew that he played this game with the cat by taking a bath and splashing water all over the floor, not just in the bathtub. So Skutzelbrunzer just hated to get his feet wet. But Prabhupada splashed this water all over so that he knew when the cat would come out from underneath the tub, he'd get his feet wet. And sure enough, when that cat come out, he'd put a paw out and get it wet and bring it back in. And then he'd put it out and get it wet and shake it off. And it was the most horrendous thing to have his foot wet. So there was quite a relationship Prabhupada had with Janki's cat, Skutzel. One very wonderful pastime with that cat at this time. So then after Prabhupada would cook, we'd have fruit for breakfast, and then he did correspondence. He would meet with whoever wanted to come and see him. And then cooking happened. So the cooking, he didn't have a servant immediately, Kirtanananda, who was his trained cook. So he would invite the girls to come help him cook. And there were some wonderful pastimes about Janki and Srila Prabhupada in the kitchen. Janki was the first female that had cooked for Srila Prabhupada besides his mother, his wife, his daughter, and some of his relatives. First female that ever cooked for him. And there are some wonderful pastimes of Janki in the kitchen. But one was, actually, I'll try to race through this in just a day. There's so many wonderful pastimes of her in the kitchen. So he was teaching cooking lessons to the girls. Oh, I forgot the morning walk. They were always amazing. A little entourage with Srila Prabhupada on the morning walk. Then Prabhupada took his lunch in his room, and then he took a little nap in the afternoon. About 4 o'clock, he would greet devotees in his room, or ask questions, invite different devotees up or newcomers to see what they were interested in, and give them instructions. So then in the evening, I told you at 7 p.m., Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the temple, Tuesdays and Thursdays outside, he established immediately the Sunday Love Feast, which was a time that Prabhupada became such a hot thing in San Francisco that year, that the storefront was there, and then we had a little front door, and a line would go past the Chinese laundry, past the entrance to his apartment building, up to maybe 25 feet long of people who wanted to crowd into the temple to take prasadam. Prasadam became the medicine for the hippie era. That thing that attracted people most to coming to the temple were amazing, amazing kirtans and amazing, amazing prasadam. And everyone learned to cook. All the men and women learned to cook from Srila Prabhupada. And the feasts were extremely opulent. Sometimes there would be so many dishes that our pots would be spread from the very front of the temple to the very back of the temple. Maybe 60 pots full of prasadam. Everybody would make a huge dish. And all visitors would make dishes. And we would share those at the Sunday feast. So Srila Prabhupada had a tremendous impact on the Haight-Ashbury and San Francisco in the year 1967. And my goodness, that schedule was maintained around the world until he left with us with different shades. India, it was much, much busier. Srila Prabhupada had the energy of a 25-year-old man or a girl. He could go with 2 or 3 hours of sleep and be so alert throughout the entire day, sometimes going to 5 or 6 engagements a day in India. Tremendous energy and stamina. And so today I think to wrap up, I feel so terribly grateful to Srila Prabhupada for the process of Bhakti Yoga that he gave us. And my deepest, deepest, deepest prayer this year and in coming years is that somehow we all together try to preserve the purity of Prabhupada's process. That thing that he gave us, that we don't change it, we don't merge it into something else that's convenient or popular or is close by and looks good, but that we maintain the purity of what he gave us all together, each one of us in whatever community and whatever sangha we have, that we try to purify that, relish it as deeply as Srila Prabhupada did, and how his spiritual master did, and how Srila Thakur Bhaktivinoda did, that they have handed us the most incredible gift, and that we don't change things. This is my deep, deep prayer. And I beg all of you to assist me in doing that myself. Thank you all. Hare Krishna.